button.
It just clicked with what you were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it took form. And so you came over to my house and you switched us all over to Linux, and it made so much sense, and I felt like we were sandbagging the whole time.
My primary goal is to bring valuable content to my listeners and to help them learn technology. Now, if the byproduct of that happens to be a popular show, so be it. Does that answer your question?
It does definitely answer my question.
Okay, I want to sidebar with you for just a second. There's another piece of software that is really, really useful.
We are live from New York City. We are live here at Cincinnati Public Radio.
We are live from Linux Fest Northwest, and the energy here is awesome, guys.
Hey guys, the next episode of the Ask Noah Show is about to go live. Thanks for streaming us on the internet and being a part of the show as it airs during our live time. We are so glad that you chose to spend your evening with us here on the air. If you haven't already, give me a call at 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. And I'll take your questions when we go live in just a few seconds.
Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from the Ubuntu Sprint in Seattle, Washington, the show that puts you, the listener, in the driver's seat because you are the content. The phone lines are open to be a part of the program. It's a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Give me a call. We'll have a conversation about your tech questions or business and tech questions. Linux advocate, above all else, small business owner, and now host of the only radio show centered around you, the listener. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. My name is Noah Chalias. So good evening to you all. Delighted to be here. Another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicking off this hour, and we are in Seattle, Washington, and we are live. We are here. We are invited by Canonical to come to the Ubuntu Sprint, where they are talking about snaps. We haven't talked about snaps a whole lot on the Ask Noah Show, and so hopefully what we're going to do while we're here is get some of the people that make snaps happen, the people who can explain snaps the best, and bring them on the show to explain them to you. That's probably coming up in a future episode of the Ask Noah Show. Now, last week, I dragged my own show off the air. And if I'm being honest, I took it a little further than and a little longer than I had really had intended to. And here's what I found out. If you want to generate some really good, honest feedback, go on the air and call some posers out. And you'll get it in spades. And so many of you went to AskNoahShow.com/better, and most of you were inspired and energized, but some of you were off-put by what I said. And again, AskNoahShow.com/better. It's anonymous, and so I couldn't respond to you there, but I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, because I think that some of you misunderstood what I was getting at. Now, if you're mad at me for what I said and for what I meant to say, that's fine. But if we have a misunderstanding, let's clear it up. So first of all, I don't care what your platform is. If you have a question, give me a call, and I'm more than happy to help you, because above all of this advocacy stuff, above all the Linux stuff, we're all human beings, and I like to solve problems first, right? I'm sitting across from a guy, I have to paint his room, because I like solving problems. The problems that comes up, I want to solve it. And if you believe that Windows is a superior operating system, that's an okay thing. If you believe that macOS is a superior operating system, that's an okay thing. I have plenty of friends that are on various different operating systems. We can be friends, that's all right. Every operating system has its advantages and disadvantages, and Linux is no different. Now, I can't come on the air and I can't say that Linux is a perfect operating system, and it does everything exactly the way I want it to do. God knows I was struggling with a couple of things just preparing for this very show, but what I was getting at was that you can't say those things about Windows or Mac or iOS or Android either. What the Ask Noah Show set out to do years when we started, and what we intend to do for years, is I'll give you an example. Our lead-in, the Linux Unplugged program. In fact, actually, I could go back and I could say this about the entire Jupiter Broadcasting Network. We are passionate people that set out to be the place that you can come as a Linux enthusiast. If you are a person who says, I own a business, I run a company, and I want to use Linux for all of those things, and I want to do all the things that you're doing on macOS or Windows. I want to accomplish those same tasks, but I want to do that on Linux. Will you help me? Is that an okay thing to do? This is the show. This is the network where that's okay. And for years, I attended conferences where I got the sideways looks, where I had to feel like I had to justify my choice of operating system, where I was embarrassed because I was using, this off-brand thing that wasn't as quote unquote good as the big boys, because I didn't fit in. I didn't conform to the norm. And this is the show where you're not judged by how new your hardware is or how close you conform to the industry standard. It's you are the Linux user, you are the norm. This is the show where the most configured distro is the new status symbol of choice. Now, if you want a game, you might have a better time on a Windows machine, because that's what Windows does. If you want iMovie Pro, sometimes known as Final Cut Pro X, you better get a Mac, because Linux doesn't run that. And so saying that Linux is better at running either of those two pieces of software, that would be a lie. But that brings me to my second point of clarification. That's not to say that you can't edit video on Linux. That's a false premise. And I actually had the opportunity to sit down in a editing studio and work with a couple of editors that had switched from Final Cut Pro to Premiere, and he was showing me some of the differences of how you can set Premiere up to kind of work around your workflows as opposed to Final Cut Pro. And basically what he said to me was, he said, with Final Cut Pro, you have to edit the way Apple thinks you should. And I brought that up to a good friend of mine that does a lot of editing on Final Cut Pro, and his answer was, I guess I just like to edit the way that Apple wants me to. And that's an okay thing. So all that said, I'm not trying to drag it down, a second week in a row, but suffice to say that I'm perfectly okay if you prefer a different operating system. All I'm asking you to do is, A, be honest about it. Don't tell people, well, you should consider X, but for me, I have to use Y because I'm special. Or B, a man with experience is not at the mercy of a man with an opinion. My main point that I was trying to communicate was that if you're looking for guides, for tutorials, for something on Linux, take the time to do the due diligence to make sure that the people that you are taking Linux advice from are actually using Linux. They're not part-time VirtualBox users. And that's really, I'm going to leave it there. But thank you very much for the feedback. And again, if you have feedback, AskNoahShow.com/better. Phone lines are open, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email, live@AskNoahShow.com. Again, we're live from Seattle. And this week, I'm excited to say that this is the first time this has ever happened. We've done an episode with Chris, and I've done a couple of episodes where I've had in-studio guests. But this is the first time I've had two other people that are co-hosting the show with me. So my friend Chris, my boss, and my friend Wes from the Linux Unplugged program.
Hello, sir. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so you guys invited me to hang out with you on the Linux Unplugged program, so now you guys are going to join me on the Ask Noah show.
It's only fair.
Yeah, it is.
All right, I want to start this hour off with an email that came in. Let's see here, get over to that one. He says, Noah, I wish I had time to call your show today, but I didn't. I was curious. I almost have my mother-in-law on board with Linux, but she uses TurboTax, and she can't live without it. Now, I don't want to complicate things for her, so that rules out something like a VirtualBox. But does Linux have any sort of TurboTax replacement? She said the web-based TurboTax doesn't have all of the features you get with the installed program. I don't know, so I have a platform. I have a platform to argue that. I don't have a platform to argue that point. Thanks. Well, Corey, I guess from my experience, I do my taxes in TurboTax, my personal taxes, as well as my business taxes. Now, a disclaimer with that, I guess for my business taxes, we do have an accountant on staff, and she, collects things, puts things together, and generates some reports for me.
Sure, yeah.
But all the actual taxes are being done inside of TurboTax, and I have been able to get all of that stuff done. However, when you go to use the web program, I wasn't able to sign up for it online with just that account. I had to actually go to a store, buy a boxed copy of the advanced TurboTax, and then take that. They give you a little code, and you open up TurboTax in the web thing, and you enter in that little code, and that is how that's how I unlock the rest of those features. And I don't know if that, it depends. You didn't specify exactly what your mother-in-law is trying to do, but if that may solve her problem. And I can tell you, I have as the owner of a small business, and then now with the Ask Noah show, I kind of have a small business, and I have a subsidy of the small business that's kind of the community branch, but it doesn't really generate any revenue, but we funnel a lot of money into it, so it creates this kind of complicated tax thing to begin with. So I feel like if I can get my taxes done in TurboTax, the web thing, everyone can.
Yeah, someone with a simpler needs.
Yeah, you'd think so. So give that a shot, Corey. Tell me if that works, and get back to me if it doesn't. If it doesn't, just write me back and just say, hey, you know what? This is what my mother-in-law is trying to do, and if I have specifics to look into, I'll take a look at that. Again, the phone number, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard. Become a part of the program. Now, actually, let's go over to the phones. Who do we have here? Jordan, West Virginia. Hey, Jordan. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, how's it going?
Excellent, Jordan. How can I help?
Yeah, so I've been using Photoshop for about the past 5 years, and I was thinking about switching over to Linux. Is there an alternative?
Yeah, actually there is, Jordan. The most direct alternative to Photoshop on Linux is going to be a program called GIMP. And that's short for the GNU Image Manipulation Program. And here's what's really nice about GIMP and Photoshop. One is, actually, a lot of people have gone away from Photoshop. A lot of the people that I knew that used to use Photoshop for a lot of things have actually gone to Adobe's program, which is Lightroom, and we have a very competitive alternative on that on Linux called Darktable. So to a certain degree, Jordan, it kind of depends on what you want to do. But if you want to actually edit photos, if you want to, if you want to tweak like the white balance and you want to add some effects and stuff like that, Darktable is really not a bad way to go. But GIMP is kind of the go-to alternative. Now, one of the nice things about doing a show with other people is you get other recommendations. So Chris just handed me this program called Pinta.
Yeah, I think it's Pinta.
Painting Made Simple. And so this is an open source program for drawing and image editing.
Yeah, it's more equivalent to like Paint.net on Windows.
Okay.
So if you don't need all of Photoshop, but you need something in between.
So this would be maybe more for so for example, your mother does a lot of graphic design. Mm-hmm. So if you're creating something from scratch, essentially, you're not starting with an image, which is something that people do in Photoshop.
Yeah. You could still use this to modify and adjust images, though, because it's pretty good at since it has layers. Like if you want to go in there and make like one area a little brighter or fix the exposure in one spot, this is really good at that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, Photoshop's tough in particular because it gets used for so many things.
It does.
On the Linux side, we kind of have one program that replaces a component.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. And I'll throw out another thing. One of my favorite programs on Linux, I don't talk about it enough. I really should talk about it more. We should do a whole episode on it. In fact, we should dedicate a whole year of episodes to it. It's that great. It's Inkscape. And what Inkscape is a scalable vector graphics program. And what that allows you to do is design graphics. So, and in fact, it's interesting because we're actually going through this right now. The next year is coming up. The next year that's coming up, we're going to be redoing the Altispeed logo. We're going to be coming up on our we're going to be coming up on our 10-year anniversary. And what's exciting about that for me is I have bore a lot of brunt for my choice on the logo.
I like that mouse. That's nice.
Yeah, well, and so what the thing is, people talk about it, Chris, and so there is no such thing as bad publicity. And so I think what we're going to do, we're going to do a couple of things. I think the first thing we're going to do is we are going to have a contest or something, get the community involved to design a new logo. But then the second thing I think that we're going to do is take that logo and try to tie a lot of that. I want to keep the same roots of the logo, so I still have something to talk about. Right. And then I want to kind of morph it in. And maybe during that time, once we decide who it's going to be or whatever, I'll go in and tell the entire story of how that logo came to be, because it actually is kind of a funny story. Michael is calling from Ohio. Hey, Michael, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, first time calling. Been listening to the show for a little bit now. And
appreciate
one of the things that I had happen was I run I rent a small instance from Amazon Web Services to run some various web server utility and other utilities for myself, the Dynamic DNS and a couple other things. And I recently logged in, noticed the terminal was running slow and laggy, and pulled up HTOP, which revealed two processes running which running find on the root directory found under a hidden directory, and they were taking up 100% of the CPU, and it looks to have been somebody got in and put in a cryptocurrency miner. So,
wow, dude!
I'm not entirely sure how. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't mean to blow. I know this is probably not a great thing for you, but like, this is at the risk of sounding like a total jerk, this is a really cool call to take.
Yeah, it is great. Because you do read about this all the time, and we've covered this.
I've never talked to anyone that's had this happen, though.
I'm sorry. That wasn't even my question. I was just giving the backstory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a great backstory. You got my attention, man.
Well, yeah, and it was surprising to me. It was also a bit of an ego hit because the first time I've ever had something like that happen. But I honestly don't know how they got in. I think they brute forced the password on the default EC2-user account because I was being lazy and I disabled the key authentication. But I did run fail to ban, but the password was only 6 characters long. So anyway, so that was my fault. Anyway, so I
mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Just a short thing on password security. So not to go too far out of this, and I'll let you get your question out, and then we'll talk about it. But when it comes to password security, first of all, 12 characters and capital letter and a special character is really a great way to go. But honestly, that's a lot. Even a 6-character password, unless it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or A, B, C, D, E, F, G or something, that's a lot of effort to gain access to a random droplet just to do some cryptocurrency mining. I would think that the fact that you set a password at all and had failed to ban would alleviate you from a lot of that. So I guess that kind of surprises me. But if there's anyone out there, if you want recommendations, my minimum is 12 characters, couple ace characters, and a couple special characters. Anyway, go ahead, Michael, with your question.
Well, anyway, it surprised me too, but now I'm running all key-based and everything too. Anyway, what I was going to say was I shut down the instance, spooled up a new one, and reattached that storage volume to my new instance for mounting, so I could pull some configuration files and such. And what I wanted to ask is, do you know if there's any risk of having hidden non-principal characters in a terminal shell that I will miss when I'm doing a manual review of the files to ensure they've not been tampered with?
So is the question the risk being like script breakage primarily?
Well, what I'm worried about is I'm going through all of the files that I'm pulling off the old one to the new one because they've got a lot of custom stuff. And I wanted to make sure that you're not going to get like a non-principal ASCII character that's hiding, that might be hiding a embedded script in the document that comes through as I'm copying these files that I might miss.
Yeah, the one thing you have on your side, of course, is you could always sanity check the modification date of the file, and if it doesn't match the installation date of the software package, you have a pretty good idea that it's been touched. I doubt that's a strong possibility, to be honest with you, because mostly what you're really going to need to be damaging is you would need something to execute that script.
Right. Yeah,
so
you would
as long as you're not, if you're curious and you're unsure about it, as long as you're not arbitrarily executing them, and you check the modification date. And the other thing you could always double check is check the permissions, make sure that everything's right there. You'd probably be pretty safe. Because the only other thing you could really do is something that would check like the checksums of the files, but you'd have to have good known checksums first.
Yeah. Well, then that's the whole premise of something like Tripwire, right? Is that you're monitoring ahead of time and then checking for differences. But yeah, thanks, Michael, for the call. I really appreciate it because, like I said, I don't even know if I've known anyone.
I haven't.
Either one of you?
Well, I've definitely read, and I've heard of people that, I just recently saw a story that people that were buying ads off of the Google DoubleClick ad network were getting crypto miners embedded. And we've talked about stories on TechSnap where people are using, website cross-scripting vulnerabilities and whatnot to get crypto miners on there. But I don't know if I know anybody personally.
Yeah. I don't either. He's the first.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you have a crypto mining story, I'd love to talk to you. 1-855-450-NOAH, 1-855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Another Michael. Michael teleported into Ohio and is calling back. Hey, Michael from Ohio. Oh, no. Sorry. I'm sorry. I grabbed the wrong one. Sorry.
You can always have more Michaels.
We could always have. See, that's the problem. We have multiple Michaels. It's difficult to figure out. Okay. Michael, he didn't give his location. Hey, Michael. How's the other Michael? How's it going? Hey.
Hi, how's it going today?
Excellent. How can we help?
Yeah, so I have a suspicion about a friend of mine. He's been using Linux for a while, and what happened is he kind of he's been doing some weird stuff, and I heard people use Linux to hide their child pornography and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, here's the thing. I think that every operating system has malicious users and people that are going to put stuff in bad places, right? And, actually, it's funny because for Multispeed Technologies, my day job, I actually take a lot of time where we have computers come in and people say, did my husband do this? Did my wife do that? And, let me tell you something. It's no joke. I mean, there's going to be some people out there that are going to be laughing right now. It's not funny when you have to look at some poor woman or some poor guy and say, yeah, your significant other is engaging with other people, and here's the evidence of it. It's not a fun thing. So that's not a joke, and that happens in every operating system. That happens in Windows, that happens in Mac OS, that happens in Linux. So as far as where to find hidden data, to a certain degree, if you have physical access to the computer, the users of the computer are going to put that data, wherever they so choose. And so as far as where to find that or where to look, I don't have a good answer. There isn't really a good answer for you. It's kind of funny. If you see a lot of subfolders, if you see, like,
yeah, that's right.
Let me see that laptop there. No.
Yeah, exactly. If you see inside of the documents folder, there's another folder that says other stuff, and inside of that, etc.
Especially with generic names like that.
And inside of that, my stuff, and inside of that, photos, and inside of that, content. That's a pretty good indication you don't want to go any further.
Right.
So, yeah, that's about. I'm sorry, Michael, I can't give you a better answer than that. 1-855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email live at AskNoahShow.com. TechRadar.com headline: Apple HomePod. Well, we've waited a little bit for this one, haven't we? But Apple's HomePod is nearing a release, and we've managed to get our hands on one for some extended period of time for testing it out and listening. Sadly, we weren't able to take photos, not extensively handle the units that we showed. More on this coming soon, but we did get to hear an all manner of sound and Siri tests, as well as some of the light fondling. That's a thing. Oh boy, light fondling of the speakers. In terms of I'm reading it right from the article.
I'm pretty sure that's an audiophile or a term. Right?
Is it?
Oh, okay. No, I'm joking. No,
okay, I don't know. It's in the article.
They wouldn't be caught dead saying that.
That's what's in the article. In terms of the Apple HomePod, it is so. Apple, in the way that you'll use it, like with the AirPods, you simply hold your phone near the unit, and the handset will send over your Apple ID. The Apple Music preferences will enter the long-winded Wi-Fi passwords that you're too proud to remember, but thankfully you won't have to type it in. Now, I've been told by people that have seen this thing and the people who have played with it, and I did a little bit of research today before the show, that Apple has done a really good job at creating this expensive, mono, but decent enough sounding speaker. Now, the problem that I run into when I talk about this kind of stuff with people is that we always have to talk about audio with a plethora of addendum. So, well, it's good for a smart speaker. Well, it's good for streaming audio. Well, it's good for what it is. But the problem is that audio, particularly music, doesn't exist with an addendum. And I've spent years listening to various speakers, different amplifiers, different mediums, everything from vinyl to CDs to digital audio, lately DSD, and different layouts, different setups. How do you set these speakers up? Is the best thing in an isosceles triangle? Should you have the speakers a little bit higher? Should you have the speakers pointed out? Should you have the speakers pointed in? Should the subwoofer be in the center of the room, over to the corner of the room? All of those things affect the sound. And so when I hit 2018, I get to a point where I'm like, yes, I do want multi-room audio. And yes, I do want to get my music online and not from optical discs. And yes, I want to be able to control it from anywhere in the house. But no, I don't want it to be cloud-based. No, I don't want it to be streamed over Bluetooth. No, I don't want to be owned by a company. And what I was really looking for was an open-source hardware device that could run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, playing audio from an audio library that I owned, my local media, or the ability to play from online streams, or maybe even from local radio, just depending on what I wanted to listen to.
Local would be nice.
I want that audio to be everywhere in my house, and I wanted it to be zoned so that if I went from one room to another, I could independently control per room what I wanted to listen to and how loud I wanted it to be. Yeah, everyone's like,
right,
yeah, that sounds great. Everyone looked up from the laptops. Like, yes, tell us more. And I didn't want to spend a lot of money. I didn't want to have to let Google spy on me to get it. I didn't want to be marketed to by Amazon. And the past few weeks, I finally found a solution to what I was searching for. In fact, I was so excited that we actually made a video review of it because it's just better if you can see it. Now, to understand what it takes to do this show every week, it often means that I find myself finding something kind of cool and I have to make an episode out of it. And maybe I end up using it personally, or maybe that was just what I used for the show that week, and then it goes by the wayside. But to a certain degree, showing that technology off is part of my job. But sometimes, like this week, when I find a project that I realize I can't live without. And this week, this project is Volumio, which, by the way, that takes a little bit to say. Like after you kind of read it a couple times, it's like they just they put volume and then added an IO at the end of it.
So how is it? What is it again?
I think it's Volumio.
Okay.
Yeah, but but if you had said it first, whatever that was would have been wrong.
That's
we know that.
Volumio?
Yeah, exactly. Volumio is an open source web-based music server that runs on x86, Raspberry Pi. If you go over to their website, which we'll have linked in the show notes, many other architectures. And what's fantastic about Volumio is by default, it's completely local. You can even store music on the Pi itself. And for me, I tied it to my NAS. Now, just to be clear, I wanted to be able to listen to my music in my bathroom. And so when I first set out, I was like, well, I have this little device that's inside of the wall that I can pair my phone to with Bluetooth, and then I can send audio over it that way. And what happened was it just snowballed into this really complicated beast. So in my basement, down in my network operations center, which my wife sometimes mistakenly calls the laundry room just because I let her put her washer and dryer in there, she installed this. I installed this two-channel amplifier, and I connected a Raspberry Pi, first generation, a Raspberry Pi, running the Volumio software, with a Behringer UCA202. And if you're not familiar with the UCA202, and I'll just take a minute to say, yes, the 202 is an unbalanced device, so it's a pain because you get a little bit of interference. But it's for $20. It's a USB DAC that does 192 kilohertz audio. It's a really good deal. Well, you have a couple of them. Those little red deals with the RCA, yeah. It works really, really well, particularly in this situation where the run is only like, maybe 6 inches. So from that two-channel amplifier that's pulling in the Volumio audio, it's then going to a 4-conductor connection block that I've run 14-gauge 4-conductor wire to. And those wires then independently run to a bunch of different volume controls all over the house. Now, the advantage to that is when I'm in my bathroom, I have a specific set of needs. I need a waterproof speaker that's mounted into the ceiling, a stereo waterproof speaker, because I don't have the ceiling space to put 2 full speakers. I need one speaker that has both left and right channels. And of course, I need to be able to turn the volume up really, really loud because the shower's running. When I finish my shower, I want to walk into my bedroom and start getting dressed. Now, that speaker doesn't have to be nearly as loud as the speaker that was on in the bathroom. And I also don't want cords hanging all over the place, and I don't really want, speaker stands sitting all over my bedroom. So it's really nice to have 2 high-quality stereo speakers inside of the ceiling. And then, once I'm done getting dressed, I can walk out of my bedroom, down the hallway, into the entryway or the living room, and I can have some really good, high-quality, high-end speakers like Sunfire Ribbons CRM2s that Bob Carver made, and I can have them perfectly set up in an isosceles triangle on stands at ear level, the whole 9 yards. And to even come close to doing that with any of these smart speakers would mean that I'd have to have, first of all, I'd have to have some way to sync all of them, which does exist, and I've seen it done on the Google Home thing. But then I'd have to have these little boxes sitting all over the place, which, I've yet to see one that sounds as good as an actual high-fidelity set of speakers. But I'd also have to have power to each one of these devices, or I would have to charge all of these devices up. And if I did all of that, I might have a system that sounds 60% as good, except it would easily cost me 10 times the price. I think the Apple HomePod is like $350 or something. So that's like $700 just for a set of...
I think all of the Sonos 5, Google Max are all around.
Yeah, they're all in the same. Yeah, there's not one that's better than the other. But the advantage of Volumio is the way I look at it is it has fundamentally become a part of the house. So now it's accessible from my phone. It's accessible from a web browser. But because it's part of the house, it sits strategically connected, statically mounted to the wall with a wired audio interface that supports 192 kilohertz of bitrate with a wired Ethernet cord. And I'm so excited about Volumio. If you want more information, make sure to check the website, the Volumio website out. They have downloads for literally every platform you could ever imagine. And I got myself so excited that even though I was on my way out here to cover the Ubuntu sprint, I stopped and we shot a really short review on what Volumio can do. Because the thing is, you can't really get a good feel of how amazing this product is until you actually see it in action for yourself. So we filmed a short review of Volumio, and we demonstrated it in action. You can check that out at AskNoahShow.com. Click on the video section, as well as we'll have a link for you in the show notes. And new this week, starting this week, all of the links that I talk about will also be available in your podcast app. So swipe left, so you'll get to the right screen on Android and Pocket Casts. And I'm sure there's a similar way to do it in iOS. And listed below will be all of the links that we have here in the show notes. Again, open phones this hour, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Again, we're live from the Ubuntu Sprint in Seattle, Washington. And I just realized that we're in restricted casting, but I'm going to jump on to...
Did you mention, by the way, that this thing runs, this Volumio runs on a Raspberry Pi? Did you say that?
Yeah, in fact, I'm running it on a first-generation Raspberry Pi.
Oh, nice. And it's solid.
I bought the third-generation Raspberry Pi because I didn't think the first-generation Raspberry Pi was going to have enough power to process this thing, right? Yeah. Especially if you're streaming audio. Because not only does it do local audio, but you can add streams. So I added like the Jupiter Broadcasting stream.
Oh, nice.
I added
mixes it right into
the Ask Noah stream. Yeah, and then what you can do is then you pick that radio station. It shows up as a My Web radio station. You click that radio station, and then it streams it. And then I was able to go out to our local radio stations, and they're all streaming online, and I was able to pull that off. And actually, I'm going to add this too, because this is something that's really great about the way we're doing these show notes in the podcast player. There's a really great tutorial, and I'm going to have it won't be available in the show notes, but it will be available in the podcast app. So that's the incentive to go check that out. It's a video on how to extract the stream URL from TuneIn.com. So if you have a station like my local radio station, they don't tell you what they're streaming to, but you can use you can right click on the play button and click Inspect Element. Go over to the Network tab. And right listed in there, it will tell you this is the stream URL. It's the thing that's using the most data. So I'll have a link to that video in the podcast player app only. So make sure to check that out when you download the show. Again, phone lines 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. So I want to jump back into the Mumble Room for a little bit. Hey, Mumble Room, how's it going?
How's it going?
So you guys stuck around for the Ask Noah show, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Always.
That's awesome.
For once, that's past my bedtime.
Yeah, right? So I have to ask, have any of you even heard of Volumio, or better yet, even played with it?
I heard of it through Tech Thing by Patrick Norton, so...
Okay.
I didn't hear about it yet, but that's actually pretty cool. I'm looking at...
Yeah, it is.
It's quite a good useful default distribution for Raspberry Pi. It comes as a pre-made image and everything, so it's very nice.
They're also working on Google Home integration.
Oh, really?
That's hilarious.
Did you listen to my whole setup?
Yeah, I know, right? This is supposed to be the anti-Google Home, although, really, why not? That just extends it even further, right? Because that's just another endpoint.
I mean, if you already have one, you'd want to tie it in.
Yeah, exactly.
I read an article saying that they were going to use it to just control it, not have Google talk back. I don't think, but just to control.
Nice. And you like music, I can tell. The nice thing about this too is that it depends on what you're connected to, I suppose. But a lot of these solutions, like how do I stream my FLAC files? This does that. Does it support Spotify? Yes. Will it support AirPlay? Yes. Does it do universal plug and play in DLNA? So it really snaps in. And the other thing that makes it really nice
I'm
is
fixing
you don't
it.
have to be an expert. When you load this thing up on a Raspberry Pi, it works with like quote-unquote Bonjour or Avahi DNS, and it broadcasts itself to your network. So you can just put in like, I forget, it's like volumio.local or whatever, and it will resolve because it's using broadcast DNS, which is nice for those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I actually created a custom DNS for that. Well, mostly because, the thing is, here's how I know a technology really is good, and it's again, I feel like I'm talking about this all weekend, but there's different levels of technology. There's the technology that I think is good because it's a good piece of open source technology and it's usable for me, or it could replace something. There's that level. But then there's this entire other level of just like, it's just good. Like, it doesn't matter what metric you stack it up to, it just really works good. And where I personally get that metric from is my wife, because she doesn't have the same ideals as I do, right? Like, so when I go into something and I say, "Isn't this really cool?"
Yeah.
She looks at it and she's like, "Well, I don't know. Does it work as well as I think it should?" And if she just won't use it, she won't complain. She just won't use it. And how I knew Volumio was really, really onto something is the next morning we got up and she sat down and I showed her how it worked and stuff. And so she pulls her phone out and she's like, "You're telling me I can just click on this song, boop, and it plays in the bathroom." And it plays in the bedroom. And I'm kind of watching the clocks turn, right?
Yeah.
And then as we go on a little bit further, then she starts telling me, "Well, could I make my own playlist?" "Well, sure, honey, you can make your own playlist." "Oh, great." So she starts dragging songs into her playlist, and then she has a playlist. She goes, "Well, I need more music. We're running out of music." So I said, "Well, the nice thing about owning Altispeed Technologies, which, we have a media division, we do DJ events, is we buy lots of music. So we got thousands of songs you can go pick from." So she looks and she goes, "Yeah, you don't have the kind I want." So we'll buy them on the account. That's fine. You can buy them on work, honey. No price too high. We spent $150 in music. We downloaded a lot of songs from Amazon. But she made a playlist, and now every single morning, I have to fight her to use the system. In fact, the amplifier that I bought supports 2 zones. So I could actually have 2 Volumio players, and we could choose. I could say, so I could go in the bathroom and I could say, I want to listen to zone 1 or zone 2. In fact, they have this right here, this thing right here. So I can choose music.
We're in the hotel room, and you're in the ballroom.
So they have music 1, music 2, music 3, music 4.
It's like an LCD screen up on the wall.
Yeah, I could do the same thing in my house. I'm considering doing this because now I need my own Volumio box.
You know what you ought to do? This is Chris's parenting tip. You integrate this thing throughout your house. You put speakers everywhere, and then you upload custom MP3 files of you "Come on, come to dinner, go to bed, knock it off," and then you just trigger that throughout the house.
I haven't done custom MP3s of yelling at the kids, but here's what I did do. I downloaded a 2-hour audio recording from freesound.org, which we were talking about. It's a really great site.
Yeah.
Of ocean waves.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then what I did was I dropped it into Volumio and told it the volume should always be 40% of whatever the jam and music is, right? And so when I go to bed at night, I took another feature too. So when I go to bed at night, I start this audio file. It starts playing. It's really great. The other feature that Volumio does, and I didn't write it down here on the show, and it's not in the video review, but it's really cool, and I've used it every day. It has an alarm function.
Oh, nice.
So I can tell it at 7 in the morning, I want you to play this particular playlist. And since I was 13 years old, I used to wake up, maybe even younger than that, I used to wake up to Morning Edition. And anyone that has ever listened to NPR knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, I think 80% of alarm clocks in America wake up to Morning Edition's theme song. And so I went and downloaded that and threw it on my Volumio and set that as my alarm. So in the morning, at 90% volume, that's what wakes me up. And it's been really fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a really good tip.
Phone lines, if you want to join the conversation, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. RedHat.com headline, Red Hat acquires CoreOS. The world's leading provider of open source solutions today announced that it had signed a definitive agreement to acquire CoreOS Incorporated, an innovator and leader of Kubernetes and container native solutions, for a purchase price of $250 million with an M dollars, subject to certain adjustments at closing that are not expected to be material.
That is a remarkable deal. When Instagram goes for $1 billion and CoreOS goes for $200 million, that tells you something's off.
$250 million, $250
That's infrastructure. I mean, CoreOS is providing container infrastructure that Red Hat will make millions of for the next 15 years.
Right.
And they got it for $200 million. And Facebook buys Instagram for $1 billion. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it goes to show something too when you start thinking about the level of the way that Instagram has changed the world and the level of way that CoreOS could potentially change the world.
And just containerization has changed the data center.
Oh, right,
absolutely.
And that's what they're at the center of that. And they're leading some of the areas. I mean, obviously Docker is a huge player too, but CoreOS. The people behind CoreOS, I've talked to them.
Yeah.
They are really smart. I've done interviews with them. They are really forward-looking, and they're truly distro-agnostic kind of approach to their tools. They've really worked to bake some of the stuff they've worked. They could have kept it to CoreOS, and etcd has branched out beyond CoreOS and a lot of the other things that they're doing. And Red Hat, Red Hat just got one of the best deals of their life.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and I think it's good for CoreOS, too. And so this is – I'll tell you why I think this is a fantastic win for everyone involved, CoreOS as well. It enforces a fundamental belief that I've had for some time, and that is that we have heard over and over and over again, every time we talk to somebody from Red Hat, that they find people in the community doing really cool things, and then they give them money to keep doing those things. And we've heard that from the folks at FreeIPA. We heard the same story from the Fedora folks. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts if we talk to the folks at CoreOS and ask them what has changed in their daily workflow, in a couple of years. They'll say, well, it's easier to make payroll, and we all eat better and have nicer houses, but we still have autonomy over the project. And our original goals are there, and our original vision is there, and that's the way that Red Hat participates in the community. I think that's really to be respected. And from the Red Hat side, like you said, I think that basically anyone that has existed in the enterprise understands the true value of CoreOS and understands the benefit and what they bring to Red Hat. What's funny about your comparison to Instagram to this is I would say there's a very high likelihood that Instagram will end up running on CoreOS. There's a chance that happens.
Yeah, or at least some of their technology.
So it's a really cool story, and having been to Red Hat and talked to these folks, I know how they operate. And I get people too. They'll ask me. They'll say, how do I get employment at Red Hat? What does Red Hat look like? And so when we went to Red Hat, and I actually got a chance to interview a lot of the people that make those decisions, and I asked every one of them the same question. I said, what do you look for if somebody wants a job at Red Hat? What do you look for? And the answer that they gave me every single time was participate in the community. Don't come to me and hand me your resume and say, this is all of the things I have done. Show it on your GitHub page. Go contribute to some projects. Go find some projects that matter that you care about. Contribute to them. Show us what you can do. And if we like that, we'll hire you and we'll just give you money to keep doing the same things you're already doing. And that goes back to what I was talking about a couple weeks ago. And you and I kind of had this conversation, not in these words, but we were talking about this earlier today. It's so much easier to find a thoroughbred running horse and just kind of redirect them the way you want them to go than it is to try to find this donkey and get him up to run. And so when you can do that as Red Hat as a company, that's what they're doing with CoreOS. They found a really successful project that is working really, really well for CoreOS, and Red Hat says, we can make a lot of money off of that.
I agree, and I think too it's great for CoreOS because it's not like they were really breaking Docker's hold on the market and on mindshare.
Right, they were a little bit niche, even if very well regarded in the community.
Right, so they were sort of struggling to gain further adoption, although things had been lining up for them. But now with Red Hat coming on board, it's good for them too. The struggle sort of subsides because there's a built-in path to success as part of the whole Red Hat suite. One
question I do see being discussed a lot in the wake of this, and obviously it's still early days, is what's actually going to happen to container Linux? Some of the release notes here say that RHEL will remain Red Hat's real only commercial Linux offering. So, are we just going to see some integrations and better tooling on the Project Atomic side?
Right.
Or will these projects really continue wholesale?
Or do we see some things being tried in Fedora down the road?
Right.
Some of these tools getting integrated and them
some of the
experimenting.
release models and yeah.
And then when do we see that stuff landing in RHEL and CentOS?
Exactly.
That's going to be really interesting.
We'll be excited to watch as this continues. And the thing is, this story broke just a couple of hours ago. And so at the Us Noah Show, we're going to continue to follow this story, and we'll bring you perfectly presented analysis after hours of meticulous research as the story continues. Again, phone lines are open, 855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Tom'sHardware.com. Headline, here comes the silicon patch. Earlier, Kernadzik, how do you pronounce this last name?
I'm not saying that.
Yeah, CEO Brian from Intel said that the company would begin to ship products with in-silicon fixes for the vulnerabilities later this year. He did not elaborate, but logistically this means that the company will include fixes for the 10 nm generation of products.
That's a big assumption to make.
Yeah, well, I think what and the article goes on to, I'll have the link in the show notes, and you guys can read the rest of it.
You got to wonder, would this Intel CEO even be saying this if Linus hadn't blown up last week at them?
I think that's a big part of it. I think Linus's response to that is a big part of that, but I also think that Intel I think that as software vendor, we talked about a story last week on the Ask Noah Show where Red Hat was catching a lot of bad PR for some of the fixes that they told their customers to go to Intel to get. And that's because they wanted those customers to go get those patches from Intel. And Intel passed that off as, well, they're just kicking the can back to us because they don't actually want to fix it. And I think that Intel figured out pretty quickly, we have to fix this in hardware. We have to ship useful products. And the answer I had gotten, and it wasn't from an Intel representative, but it was somebody who has worked very close with them, the answer that he was given was it would be another 3 generations of Intel processors before they were going to try and patch this in hardware.
Mm-hmm. And the extra sort of stink on that spin is, and what Linus called them out for was, in the meantime, Intel's marketing strategy was to spin the fixes as performance optional features. So you have the option to mitigate Spectre if you'd like. If you'd like to turn that on, you can.
You weird, slow security freaks out
Right.
there.
There will be a new feature in the microcode that will enable that flag in the silicon if you want. But because we're not turning it on by default, that's a feature. And that's where Linus really sort of blew up.
Yeah, well, you can understand that, right?
So I wouldn't say they quickly came to this conclusion they're at
Yeah,
now.
well, quickly as in within 7 days from getting called out.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair, yeah.
But yeah, no, they. I mean, you can dress a turd up; it's still a turd, right?
Yeah. This year, though, if they could get the silicon fix this year, that would require a fundamental restructuring of their pipeline.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. But if they actually get it out, again, phone lines 855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Lyle joins us from Georgia. Hey, Lyle, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, this is Lyle. I met you at Self. Probably don't remember optometrist.
Actually, I do. I do. We stood out in the we stood out in the hallway, right out in front of the booth and talked.
You were very busy. Yeah, we were very busy. Well, love the show. I got two quick questions. One, can you go over Xorg and Wayland? I don't quite. Is all Linux distributions use one or the other? Also, what Cat5 cable is the easiest to work with? What brand? I'm a ham radio, and building cable's really good for a ham radio, and that's pretty much it.
Sure. Well, Lyle, let's start with your Xorg and Wayland question because I've got Chris and Wes here to help me. Essentially, the Linux was designed at a time when we only had basically text-based operating systems. And so once we got to the point where we wanted to start doing graphics and stuff, we had to develop a system to make that work. And the neat thing about X's, and what I've always liked about X, is that it runs in two forms. It runs in the client side and the server side. And you don't always know that when you're on your laptop or on your desktop because it just looks like a desktop to you. But one of the neat things that you can do, and those of us that work in the system administration, which would be everyone here at this table, have done at one time or another, is you can disconnect the front side client of the X system and connect it to the back end system of a computer that sits across the world. And so in English, what that means is I can run a local Firefox instance on a computer that's sitting in China if I want to. And that provides for some really unique and useful administration tools.
Yeah.
The problem with X is, because it was designed so many years ago and it has so many weird problems, if you're watching an interesting video or have some interesting audio playing and you close your laptop and the laptop goes to sleep and you wake it back up and you get to that logon screen and you try to hit the mute button and nothing works, or you get a flash of what's coming on the screen because that, which was considered a security flaw from the Mac side. All of these things happen because X is old and wasn't really designed for the job that we wanted to do.
Right. Modern desktops that didn't exist in that form, so it doesn't have those features.
Yeah, and you see that as an end user, you see that in the form of screen tearing, or if you set up a high DPI screen and it's connected to a laptop that has a lower DPI screen, you just get the lowest common denominator. I mean, there's lots and lots of differences between X and Wayland because they're completely architected differently. But probably the biggest thing between X and Wayland is Wayland itself doesn't do any drawing on your screen.
Right.
And X has two main drawing APIs, one that we don't use at all anymore. Ironically, it's the core X11 protocol, which we don't use anymore.
No.
And then the other one is XRender, or XRender is actually how you say it out loud, not when I read it in my head. And it's an extension which has sort of been built on top of X, and it provides modern compositing and gradients and graphics calls. That's how Cairo on GNOME will draw some of their like when you're looking at GNOME system performance and you see the lines. That's using XRender, which is Cairo sitting on top of XRender, which is sitting on top of GTK, which is sitting on top of the GNOME shell.
Right.
So we're 3 or 4 layers deep, and all of these things have to communicate with each other in perfect timing. And when they don't, you see things like tearing. Wayland, however, has no drawing APIs. It's just a client. It has a DRM buffer, and then you build something that does the drawing and talks to it, and it communicates in that protocol. Wayland supports multiple DPI monitors. Wayland is tear-free. It has a much better security architecture. It's designed with security in mind. But it also, and because of that, it's much less featureful. It's much less complex.
Right.
And so it's on the onus of the desktop projects to make that gap up a little bit.
And Wayland doesn't, you touched on this, Wayland doesn't include a compositor, so you're using something like KWin or Mutter to actually draw the elements on the desktop. And Lyle, I don't want to, I hope I'm not talking over your head. So essentially, if you have a program like Skype, yeah, so let's take it back a little bit. So let's say you have a program like Gedit, like you have just a text editor, right? The computer knows, the display server knows that I have to have a application. I have to have a window, and the window is this many pixels wide by this many pixels deep, and it has to talk to this, run this mathematical code to when the user does this input and all that stuff, right? But something actually has to draw a gray box on the screen and put a little white line that turns on and off to indicate the cursor and stuff like that. So those two parts, one is the display server, the thing that's actually doing all the calculations, the back end, the work, and then you've got the compositor, which is actually drawing all of the stuff on the screen.
It's like a projector in a way. It's
a projector. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, the most simple answer to your question is Xorg and Wayland are display servers. They're the things that are responsible for the graphical interface on your computer. Xorg is a very old one. It works very, very well, but there are some systemic problems with it, and so we have to migrate to something newer. Wayland is the competitor, I guess you could say, the evolution, the next thing that we are going to go to, the replacement after we get done with Xorg.
And its core question is are they running the same Xorg and the same Wayland? Essentially, with some minor protocol differences or version differences, you're either getting Xorg or Wayland. Right. And now most modern distributions, Ubuntu, Fedora, others, are shipping both of them installed.
Right.
And at the login screen, you can drop a box down and choose which one you want and just see which works better on your system. And if one doesn't work as well, you switch to the other one until we make this transition.
And for your second question, Lyle, which brand of Cat5 do we use? We order all of our cable. Doesn't matter what it is. All of our cable comes from a company called Belden. And the reason is because, well, one, the reps at Belden are just amazing to work with. But the other reason is because you just can't find better cable. Belden, they have research labs, and they literally sit there and will take a stretch of cable and try various different things to it to see how it tolerates being crushed, how it tolerates being rolled over, how it tolerates heat, how it tolerates cold, how it tolerates being inside of a ceiling. All of that stuff is tested. They publish all of those specifications. They tell you exactly how long you can run it. Then they tell you how long you should run it. They're fantastic. I can't say enough good things about Belden, and we buy. We spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. One thing I will tell you: don't buy Cat 5. Don't buy Cat 5. In 2018, the price difference between Cat 5 and Cat 6 is so minuscule. Buy Cat 6.
Yeah,
just for the future proofing alone.
So thanks, Lyle, for the call. We really appreciate it. 855-450-NOAH, 855-450-6624. We got just a couple of minutes left. I'm going to go to Chris in Canada. Hey, Chris, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. Good to talk to you again.
Same, sir. How can I help?
So I have a slight problem with my booting setup on my PC. I've got 3 SSDs in there, one that's a Windows 10, one that's running Ubuntu Mate, and one that's running Solus. And I had noticed that my Solus was doing its updates, but it wasn't getting the newest kernel, so I was trying to use Grub Customizer to pull in the right information. But now I have entries all over the place that I can't seem to get rid of, and it won't seem to detect which drive is actually got the bootloader on it, even though I know which one it's supposed to be.
You don't know how funny this question is. I landed in Seattle, in SeaTac. I get in my rental car. I drive to JP1. I'm literally standing in the studio. I bet I wasn't there for 45 seconds. And Chris handed me a laptop with this exact same problem. Problem.
I was done. I'm like, I got to move on.
I'll tell you where I left off before I didn't solve the problem. I did get it to work inside of the BIOS. Inside of the BIOS, if you have a UEFI install, you can tell the UEFI interface that there's a window. You can specify. You can add a UEFI entry, click Browse, and choose the UEFI loader from Windows and the UEFI loader for Linux, and that will work. So then, but the problem with that is every time you boot your computer, you got to hit F12 and then choose the whatever operating system you want to use. So that's not a really ideal solution, but it does work. The second thing you can do, and this is where I left off troubleshooting, you can add an entry to Grub, and but the problem is the entry actually has to be for the Windows boot manager, and so you have to add, Grub has to point to the Windows boot manager, and then the Windows boot manager has to actually boot, and if you update Windows, the Windows boot manager rewrites the master boot record, and then you have to do this whole process over again. So the post I was reading is manually boot into Windows, and then there's just a single command that you can add Linux to the Windows boot manager.
Yeah.
Now, I don't really like that plan, and if you can avoid... Well, the problem is then you're trusting Windows to boot your Linux thing. And
it does work pretty reliable
in
my experience.
Okay,
yeah, I've used a couple systems that have booted that way, but you're right, it does feel gross.
You know, if you want some commands to look at, just so you have an idea how to do all this, surprise, surprise, the ArchWiki has a section specifically on this. Exactly on this, yeah.
Well, send that to me, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. Joel is calling from Telegram. Hey, Joel, how's it going?
How's it going, Noah? How's it going, Chris? And how's it going, Wes?
Great. Cool to take a Telegram call.
Yeah, I know.
That is nice, yeah.
How can we help?
So I'm sort of curious about how to convince people to get from platforms that are commonly used among a lot of people. And I do think the reason why a lot of people adopt certain platforms is due to certain applications such as iMessage, if that makes any sense, because a lot of people... Like, for example, in my community, as far as I'm aware, it's an Apple-centric. A lot of my fellow classmates from middle school onwards were using iPhones due to other people being on iMessage, and you can't get iMessage on an Android phone. And even though I personally chose to, it's like a subset of a culture or something. And how do you convince people to go outside of their box and go into alternatives? You can also see this with the Skype problem as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll in answering this question, unfortunately I'm going to have to give away a little bit of my magic sauce. Now this whole process is going to be less effective. But the truth of the matter is, Joel, that process starts the moment I meet somebody. The moment I meet somebody, I start dropping little hints to get onto Telegram, to use things like Thunderbird, to use things like web-based applications. And the reason for that is because when you eventually come down to trying to switch, if they're already using those things, it makes it really easy for them to switch.
Yeah, I had this problem with my family on iMessage.
Oh, sure.
Everybody wanted the blue bubbles, and they wanted to be able to send pictures, and they wanted to be able to do iMessage group chats.
Right.
And I got the majority of them, not all of them, but I got a bulk of them over to Telegram, simply because I honed in on what it was that they needed from messaging.
Oh, sure.
And I'll give you an example. What they hate about iMessage is it takes a week and a day to send a picture in iMessage. I don't know what the iPhone's doing, apparently, but it just takes forever to send. But Telegram whips that thing out in
instant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I started showing them that. I'm like, look how fast this goes. Look at this group thing, how we can do this video really easily. And it works with Uncle Joe's Android phone, too. So, that's nice. And that won them over because you got it on Android, you got it on iPhone, you got it on the desktop.
Right.
So some
Even
of them
if you don't have a Mac, you have it right on the desktop.
Right. Some of them wanted it on the desktop because they work at home and stuff. And so what I started doing was honing in what they needed and saying, well, you could use it for this. And sometimes that's not always an option, but that generally succeeds if you can make the case.
So going back to your question, Joel, that's how you start getting people. That's how you start. That's where that train really starts. And then once you get to the point, then you start selling them on the benefits of Linux, the benefits of open source, stuff like that. And because if you've done your job right, they're already using all of these applications that are compatible with Linux. It's a pretty easy slip. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I sort of do see this platform stuck a little bit with regards to broadcasting and having to use Skype in certain instances because everybody has a Microsoft account, but not everybody has a Mumble account per se.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, one of the things that we've done at Ask Noah is we've done both Mumble and Skype, and we've gone to just a web-based solution that people just visit a web page and then they can connect into our studio, and that has worked really well for us. And a large part of that is I want to be operating system agnostic. I don't want to be tied to one particular operating system.
Yeah.
If you guys aren't aware, we're doing what we're calling the Distro Elimination Challenge. The Distro Elimination Challenge is where we are trying to pick the best distribution for a given task. Now, when we ask what the best distribution is, it doesn't necessarily have to be the distro that you would use. It just has to be which one would you use if given those two choices. So, for example, last week we asked you about Elementary OS and Gentoo. So if you had to pick an operating system for your desktop and your only two choices in the world were Elementary OS and Gentoo, which one would you pick? 78% of you said Elementary OS. Only 21% of you said Gentoo. And to be honest, that's not a huge surprise to me. But this week, we are doing... Oh, this is good. This week, we are doing Canonical's Ubuntu Mate, headed by Wimpy, who is here at the conference, and one of my personal favorite distros. And the competition is... pop_OS!! So, which of those two operating systems would you use? Ubuntu Mate or pop_OS!! We'd be interested to see. You can cast your vote at AskNoahShow.com/elimination. Now, we're about to enter round 2 of the Ask Noah Show Elimination Challenge, and when that happens, we're going to take the winners of round 1, and we're going to start pitting them against the other winners in round 1. And so I think it's going to get a lot more intense, and it's going to be really interesting. When all of this is done, what we're going to do is take all of this information, and we're going to put this up on our a website, a specific website, which, God, I keep seeing updates on this thing, and the people that are working on it, we got a couple people in the community that are doing this. This is really great. And I was talking with Chris, and he gave me some ideas, and I was like, he couldn't even finish a sentence, and I was already in the group, and I'm like, this is what we have to do. And they're like, that is a lot of work from an automation scraping standpoint. I'm like, I don't care. We got to find a way to do it. This is a really good idea. So, we're putting a lot of work into this, but I think what it's going to be is the place that people go to say, this is what I want to do with the distribution. Which distribution should I use? Whether that's a desktop or a laptop or whatever. Hey, Chris, where can people find you? Thanks for joining me.
Dude, you bet. How about at ChrisLAS on the Twitter and follow the network at Jupiter Signal?
There you go. Wes?
I'm at Wes Payne, and make sure you go check out TechSnap at techsnap.systems.
Hey, I like it. Thanks a lot for joining me this week. We really appreciate having you. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. Where's the rest of it? Whatever. Have a good day, everyone. We'll see you next week at 6 p.m. Central.